What's up, beautiful people? Today we are going to talk about investing in property, how to get started investing in property, and what you need to know to help you get on the track of winning. Okay, this is all it's about, is winning in property. How to invest in property, it could easily be like a step-by-step guide, but I'm going to keep it as a thing where if you were just to generally ask me, which I find a lot of people are asking me, it's the beginning of 2026 and people want to know, okay, I've got my goals, I need to start working towards them, help me, how do I get started in property? Okay, so the first thing to look at when you are getting started in property is what you want from property. Why do you want to get started? Why do you want to invest? What are your long-term plans and what are your short-term plans? There must be a mixture, probably a good mixture of the two, because property is a long-term game if you want any kind of wealth. So it's not something you just jump in, make some money and jump out and do it successfully, because there's just so much to know about it and there'll be a lot of trial and a lot of error. So I find having an idea of what your long-term goals are and what your short-term goals are will help you navigate what way to go. Of course, there's so many different strategies. So knowing whether you want to just get property so you can have money held in property so it can grow with the market and grow your capital that way. But there are other ways, like short term, where you would be getting in with lower entry, or it doesn't matter what the entry is, but you'd be getting in, and the idea is to make money immediately. You want to cash flow immediately. So that will dictate what route you would then take, because there's certain strategies that you would utilize in property that will not necessarily get you a short-term goal of straight cash flow immediately. Understanding what it is that you want and what you're looking for as you start listening to certain things and understanding how property works, then you would be able to navigate and know what's right for you. The second thing is get to know property. Get to know what it's all about. Start doing your research. Start doing your due diligence. I always say, like, research. With anything you're going to get into, you want to know the foundations of it, the fundamentals of it, what makes it what it is, okay? So property, we all know what that is. That's housing. It's housing that serves the community in one way, shape or form. There's different types of housing as well. So you could have commercial property, you could have residential property, you could have government property, you could even have park homes, right? Park homes, which is an investment strategy where you'd come up with a fraction of the amount that you've got to come up if you're buying a house, and then you can rent that out for holiday makers. So understanding the different types of strategies that there are, which there are quite a lot, and I understand that it can be quite complicated. So that's why when you assess what it is you have, then it helps you to navigate, okay, well, I don't really have much to start with. I have about 5k, 10k to start with. What can I get started with now to help me multiply that? Get to know the different investment strategies that there are, and as you know, you've got the typical buy-to-let strategy, which kind of on the back end of that is your BRRR, which you hear people talk about regularly. It's where you buy, refurb, rent, and then refinance. That's a very common and very popular strategy, and it's good because I wouldn't say that's a strategy in its own right, because you can use BRR as I don't want to say the word technique either, but as a way to purchase property, add value, get the money that you put in, get as much of that back out as possible, if not all of it, and then it will allow you to go and buy another house. So that's the aim. But you can do that with buy-to-lets, you can do that with HMOs, you can even do that with commercial property. So that's more like a technique that you'd use to invest in some kind of property, one way, shape or form. Then you have HMOs, there's so many different things, and I think looking at each of them and how they work, the pros and cons of all, would really help you to navigate which way works for you. And I'll give you an example. With a buy-to-let, it's a straightforward property. It's a single house. Some people call it the bread and butter of investing, because it's a villina buy-to-let. You go and you put your 25% down, you raise 75% on the mortgage, you'll have your other costs that you have whilst you're purchasing the property, and then once you have it in your possession, you rent it out to a family of some sort. Now that's fairly easy to manage. It takes a little hassle, not a lot, a tiny bit of hassle with management, and then of course tenant management. That's if you get good tenants. right? Thank God I get good tenants. But if imagine having bad tenants, that would be a different situation. But nonetheless, that's the typical investment type, and you could have multiples of those, and that's it. Then you have HMOs. HMO is where you would have multiple people in one house, and they may share the kitchen, they share the bathroom, but they have their own room, and some may even have en suites. And that would kind of come under the residential market. Right? And then you've got commercial property, where you may have a shop, or you may have a shop with some flats on top, or a shop with a HMO on top. There are different ways, but with a commercial property, there is a commercial unit involved, which is a trading business. In saying that, a HMO could be seen as a commercial unit if it comes under Senjusi. I could be saying that wrong. You know, I ain't never been too good with this Chinese. That's probably not even Chinese. Pretend I never said that. That's hilarious. I never been too good with languages. That's Senjusi. I'm saying that wrong. And therefore qualifies for a different type of status. And then from a planning perspective, and then from a commercial perspective, you can refinance. But you could even refinance a 6-bed, which does not come under Senjusi, and still get a commercial valuation. So it definitely does differ. But those are the different type of properties that you can get into. And then you have things where you're not getting into any property, you're not owning any property, where you can do rent to rent, which is again a long-term thing. So it'd be minimum of a year, up to 5 years, 10 years, and you would be renting a house off of a landlord. You'd be taking that on as a management contract, so you'll be taking over the management of the property, and then doing roomlets, right? And there are tired landlords who will not want to manage property anymore and need a service like yours. And this is what someone who was saying to me last week. They were thinking about getting started in property. They had a maximum of £8,000, didn't know where to start, but they knew that they wanted to kind of be in property and have property. So I said, okay, you want to control property? Well, the way to do it is through rent to rent. And that way you can still make money whilst you sleep, in a way. In a way, you can make money whilst you sleep with property, and that's why I love this stuff, baby. Because listen, when I was walking around with this big old belly of mine, I had that baby in there, honey, I was still getting real money. And I didn't have to work for it. But I mean, in saying that, you still have to work for it, because there'll be things that are fixed, there'll be things that are broken. But when you have a property manager, you do not have to work for it. You know what I'm saying? But that's when it comes to systems and utilizing other things. And that's something that you would look at the beginning, but also look at down the line. Rent to rent, great technique. Another one is sourcing, property sourcing, deal sourcing, or deal packaging. And that is where you would find a property that needs to have some kind of value added. So there's money in that property. You would then match it with a buyer that you should already have on your books. And then you put those two together, almost like an estate agent. You'll be like an estate agent for investors, matching them together, seeing the sale through, and getting your money at the end. And that is a great strategy for people who don't have much money to start out with, but you definitely need to know what a deal is. So you'd probably spend a lot of time sending over potential deals to investors and being open to feedback, so you can learn about what their criteria really is as someone who's buying the house. Because on paper, when you haven't got no money and you've got paper in front of you saying if you buy at 100,000 and you spend 25,000, then you can make 50,000 because the resale is 175. Well, investor would come out and look at that and say, well, actually, no, that's not the case, because I'm going to have my purchasing costs, I'm going to have my solicitor's costs. Here it says that it needs the extension to be rectified. Well, I'm going to have to extend the rent. That means I'm going to have to get building control involved. Then I'm going to have to get some drawings done and calculations potentially. So they would look at that from an investor's perspective, because they know all the real money that goes into property, and realize, you know what, honey, that deal you thought was a deal, that ain't no deal. But being open to getting feedback and having them guide you. Those are the different ways of investing in property. There's obviously other ways where you can control property and buy it over years and years from someone who wants to sell, and there's no banks involved, right? There's different ways, but those are the most common ways. And then there are, lease option, which is a really good way as well, where you're finding someone who's motivated, they want to sell and necessarily don't need the money up front straight away, that makes a great lease option. And I think people who want to start out with that, again, you really need to educate yourself, because that's the route I wanted to start with, and that's the route I did start with, but I was not successful in the immediate start because there was a lot of terminology I didn't understand. There was a process that I didn't really get. I just did a course and then I just hit the floor running. I was outside the train station 6 a.m. trying to catch the commuters, and whilst I was doing all the right things, they call that guerrilla marketing, I was doing a lot of guerrilla marketing, and that is the way to get leads. I was getting leads, I just didn't really know how to turn them over. And I think having the course was great, but I should have got someone who can hold my hand to help me turn these deals over a lot more better, because I did not know half the terminology he would talk about. Okay, and it could be really simple stuff like negative equity. What's negative equity? What's that, right? So I didn't know that type of terminology. And in case you're wondering, negative equity is when you've got a loan of say 150,000 on the house, but the house is actually worth 100,000. That means you've got negative equity. And if you had equity in the house, that means the house is worth 100,000, but your bank, you only owe 50,000. So that means you got 50,000 pounds worth of equity in the house. So that is something to really understand, is the property markets, understanding how it works, the supply versus demand. And I think I'll go into that a little bit more further, because that is a very important part to know, understanding the property market and what you're even looking at, because it helps you get a very good gist of the numbers when you get to that. And it really could be as simple as typing into Google, understanding the UK property market. It is quite general. I must say they do give quite general feedback, and that's why it's good to watch more further detailed videos from property entrepreneurs who are in the market doing it at the moment and understanding the way it works, because the market does change, it does fluctuate, and there are things to be aware of. Of course, there's laws, there's regulations. You could imagine there's so much changes happening right now in property that if you're not up to date, you really can be left behind, and that's how much changes there are. We had our last biggest change in Wales in 2022, and you guys are going through yours in England. I should say you guys, like you're in England watching, you could be America watching. In England right now, they're going through their biggest major change at the moment, which is quite similar to the Welsh one, to be honest. So I'm just like, oh, y'all are finally stepping over to my side, because this is what we've been having to deal with. But having those changes and understanding what they actually mean is very good to understand that. So you know when you're looking for properties, what to take into consideration. Third thing to do is assess yourself. Look at what you have, what money you have access to, what time that you can allow for to concentrate on this weekly. And I would also say commit to doing at least an hour of education a week as a minimum, looking at the properties and understanding that. But we've already covered that, but just an hour of that a week, just so you can really stay up to date and understand, because a lot of people have different experiences. And the good thing about hearing other people's experiences and different people's experiences is that you can pull on from different experiences. And whilst that goes without saying, it really is worth being said, because the same walk I walk is not the same walk someone else would have walked, because our situations are different, our starting lines are different, our resources are different. So finding yourself in someone else's story and your position and so forth really is helpful. But like I said, assessing yourself, looking at what finances you have. So you may have 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. That will really alter the strategy that you start with. When you're doing your research on understanding what property is all about, it's useful to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So if you feel like, okay, well, I've only got £5,000, but I really want to get started, then you should be probably looking at something like deal sourcing or looking at rent to rents. Rent to rents are great, but I will say there's a lot of time that goes into this stuff as well. You're starting up a whole new side hustle, and it's going to take not only just the education, the time in teaching yourself, but also time in getting started, doing the work, having failure and going again, having failure and going again, seeing if this works, seeing if that works, because different things work in different areas, and you might find you have all the information, all the tools, all the techniques, all the scripts, but your delivery is not right, and people just aren't buying into you because you just might not come across authentic. So you're going to have your own trials and tribulations, and it's good that you can start getting started on that ASAP. But assess yourself. Even do things like, you know what, I'm confident in this area, but I don't really feel confident in that area. And it might be, I love talking to agents, I love getting out there, I love having, well, you won't know that yet. You won't know that yet. Look at what you think you would know And so I like the front end, but the back end, I'm not strong at. I'm not good with maths. I don't really know about numbers. I don't really know about, you know, how to add up this whole thing to know about renovation costs. I've never even done a renovation. Knowing that is very helpful because it will show your strengths, it will show your weaknesses, and it'll show you, okay, there is an opportunity here for me to partner with someone who will know this. And when I'm networking, you know that you're looking for something, this particular thing in a partner. And I think it's really good to approach this as though it's a new business startup, because in effect it is. You've got to be so clear on what your numbers are that you want to minimize the errors, minimize the things that are going to go wrong. You learn from your mistakes, but also minimize them upfront as much as possible. So being clear on what it is as you're learning and you're taking in the information, you can say, oh, that would be good for me. I'll be really great at that. You know, I'm really good at researching, so I'll be able to really do good on the due diligence side of property and understanding, trying to find the values and know what this is and know what that is. But I may not necessarily be good on putting forward the offer because I'm just not confident, or I may not be good at raising the finance, which I had a lot of struggle with myself. The relationship that I had with money, I think I valued money so high that talking to people made me feel quite uneasy. And I think that it was mixed with, because being a new person, you're saying to someone, can I borrow money, but this to put into this new technique, but this is quite new to me. So now they're putting all their trust in you. So you now have to put all your trust in yourself. And it's not to say I didn't trust myself, because I'm someone who, like, if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, or I'm going to give you feedback on what has been done, and blah. But me, I'm a woman of my word. So when it came to taking someone's money, and it's not that I didn't trust myself, it's just this thing is so valuable. Oh, you're going to give me this? Thank you. Oh my God. I'm nervous now. I'm scared now. You know, it did do that. And I did have to have those conversations with myself. The fourth thing is network. Grow your network. Get out there, start networking, connecting with people who are in the same industry or getting into the same industry. Connect with people who you feel that you might be able to learn from and grow from. And then you just want to have peers in the market. You know, these are your competitors, but they're also your contacts, your colleagues, your power team. So if you go out and network, you'll probably be able to find a builder, you'd find your architect, you'd find your designer, you'd find your carpenter, your floorer, your plumber, because these people network. You know, these forward-thinking people, they know where the business is. So they're there to get business. You're there to get business. You're there to make contacts. And then, you know, ideally find your investor. You might need an investor for your rent-to-rent company, for your buy-to-lets. You know, if you want to build a portfolio, you might need some capital up front. There are people there who are looking for people like you, who are on the ground, who want to put their money into something where they can get a great return, better than what banks are offering. And that's a means for education as well, as looking at what the current interest rate is in the market and what investors' options are. So you know that when you're presenting yourself, you know what to say and what not to say. From an investment perspective and from a network perspective, investors are something you need to be comfortable with. Treat it like a business. Have a long-term plan in mind. Last but least is take the plunge. Drop in that ocean, honey. Throw yourself in the deep end, close your eyes, quiet the mental chatter, and just get started. I find one of the biggest hurdles in property is ourselves. And that was and still is today, the biggest hurdle is when you want to go to the next level, sometimes you can hold yourself back. So being able to, you know, really just take the plunge and stop the mental chatter and just go, it's priceless. It's priceless, because that's your ticket to your future. You know what I'm saying? So that's the really biggest thing, is taking that plunge. I think out of all of this, if you was to learn everything and assess your situation and go to networking but not actually act, then you would have done everything but number 5, and number 5 is take the plunge. You would still be in the same place in a year from now. So the best thing to do is take the plunge. Please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.